Hi, it's Paul Banis, the GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to fathers about all different subjects. And we're driving today into something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with a guest, Philip Sessions, about the importance of public speaking and communications and how to get, I guess, how to use that for your own success, but more importantly for us as dads is how do we transmit that value of this really, really important skill to our own children. So I've got a real expert this time. I think Larry Wilson is with me today. You've got a wealth of experience in not only public speaking, but in all types of communication, including comedy and storytelling and everything else. I'm really excited to have this conversation talk with you, Larry. So welcome, Larry Wilson.
Thanks very much, Paul. And at the risk of sounding pretentious, I just want to point out I'm your most important guest you've ever had on the podcast. So, for those of you listeners who are just tuning in, you may want to really pay attention to this one because Paul has a lot of important people on who have a lot of valuable things to share. But it has to do with my bias towards communication. I don't think there's anything more important.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. I was lucky enough to be the kind of kid who always was raising my hand and jumping to the front of the room, and I took Toastmasters class. I thought that the ability to speak clearly, to present in front of a room was really important. I signed up whenever I could in corporate America for
No,
class on
well,
public speaking. So
now
I'm totally with you.
hold a second. I'm turning the tables on you here, but let me ask you, why? Why were you that kid?
I don't know. That's a good question because I would consider myself an introvert, so I would not
Hmm?
necessarily wired necessarily to jump up, but I did theater in school. I did improvisation courses. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Maybe I just got some sort of high or some sort of stimulation or positive reinforcement each time I did it, and it continued
Maybe.
on. But I think also at the core of it was, and I'm really curious as we get into this, is I understood the importance and the value of it, having read, throughout I guess my childhood about how important it is to be able to be the person who walks to the front of the room or
Well,
not without fear walk up to somebody more important than you are, introduce yourself, shake hands,
right.
look them in the eye, those
But
kind of skills.
that's very unusual that you
Maybe.
were that kid. You just glossed over, you just sort of breezed over the fact that you joined Toastmasters.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal. That's seriously working on public speaking skills, which of course are maybe a higher level, but it's funny that you just sort of act like, oh, I don't know, I was just this person. But pardon me, this is all part and parcel of what we're here to talk about because
Hmm.
my contention is that everything worth having in this life begins and ends with communication.
Hmm.
And as you and I were saying moments ago before we went live here, for kids now, it's the worst time in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, you and I are old enough to remember a time when we thought about the future. And we thought, in the future, there are going to be computers where
Right.
everyone will be like a genius. And it never occurred to us that we might be wrong. No, in the future, everyone's going to have a computer in their pocket.
Right.
You remember Dick Tracy's two-way wrist TV? Well, it's real.
It's real.
It's here. But we use them to argue with strangers and share videos of cats.
And those skills are not necessarily well, they're not part of the communication that we're talking about, because I mean, I think you're an expert in communication from all types, just one-on-one communication. I imagine,
Yeah.
I mean, the skills that you need to talk to an adolescent child, or to talk to your partner, to talk to a boss, to talk to a subordinate, and then also the bigger picture thing, getting up in front of a group of people. I know you do a boot camp on how to
Sure.
do presentations to thousands of people at a time. So you cover that whole gamut. And I totally agree with you. The kids today, they're unlearning all the things that maybe we try to teach them at home about how to communicate, because they have this device that teaches them not how to communicate.
I mean, if in fact we do teach them anything at all, I'm hoping that we do. But you and I have a brief time here on this podcast, so there's no time for us to tippy-toe around any of this. We're going to get in real serious. Speaking, you're right, I do 2-day boot camps, and it's much more intensive. It's limited to just 10 people, and it's pretty deep dive. People come out of that with some serious skills. I have a bunch of different favorites, but currently my favorite is a woman who knew she was in a PhD program, and she knew at the end she was going to have to defend her dissertation. And she sent me a lovely video of her in her gown and mortarboard saying, "I'm Dr. Danielle now because I used the stuff from
Um,
Wilson Method." Now, to me, that's a huge win. But let's step back a little bit here, because one problem that I see happens all the time is people who kind of pay no attention to the importance of this until their kids are teenagers.
right. Yeah. Quite often. Yeah.
And then they think, oh, I'm going to jump in now and fix everything. Highly unlikely.
Mhm.
This is a job that you have to begin before they can speak,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of non-discursive information being transmitted back and forth, information without words. And I warned you before we went live. I I have a million theories about why some of these things are or not, but I also don't care about those theories. I care about results. I want to see the things we want to have in our lives happen, and I want them to happen predictably. A common mistake is that people, and the reason I was grilling you before about how you came to take Toastmasters and how you were in drama club and improv, uh, sometimes people think, oh, well, there's certain people who have a natural talent. Well, that may be, but I'll tell you this, Paul. I don't know how to teach anyone to be talented. I don't know how
Right.
to do that. But everything I teach is technique.
Mhm.
And that's great news, because anyone can learn technique. It's like
Right.
hitting a golf ball, or cooking an omelet, or changing oil in a car. You have an expert teach you, and then you practice what you've learned.
Mhm.
If you do it consistently, it's, the whole idea of trying to do it all at once, that doesn't
Yeah.
yield results. But consistent practice, and that could mean just 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day. But consistent practice will yield predictable, dependable results, because technique is transferable.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned you have 2 kids of your own, and you mentioned that they're very different.
Yep.
Tell me about the differences between them.
Well, I think very early on, but this is certainly not uncommon among a lot of parents where one child is maybe more extroverted or one child is more introverted, and they both went to the same school. They both did the same types of presentations. There was never any real fear about those presentations other than, getting them prepared and everything. But our curiosity was always why one child was very outspoken and the
Mhm.
other one was less willing to raise her hand and speak. And we always accepted that because we love our kids. But then there could be differences. But I guess the reason why I was really curious about having this conversation is for all the other parents who, it's too late for me, but but for all the other parents who want to get their kids started early on this process, whether
Yeah,
there are things that you can do when they're kids. And I shared with you that I've talked to other experts who gave a lot of other examples of ways you can get kids to speak at the dinner table by saying the prayer or expressing gratitude or telling about their day, and they are able to talk in front of their parents. That does not necessarily translate into raising your hand and talking in front of a group or volunteering to be
right.
in
No,
in,
it
in
does
a
not.
yeah.
But there are a lot of ways that we can do this. And I think you have to start with understanding one thing that I emphasize a lot in Wilson method, and this may be more advanced stages, is practicing empathy.
Hmm.
And because of my strange career, 30 years on television and on the biggest stages in the world as a comedy magician, I came into contact with all these huge stars and I saw the techniques they used to get everything they wanted.
Hmm.
And that's really what Wilson Method is built on, is that I'm teaching you stuff I learned and use myself and say, oh, wow. And one of them, of course, that's very valuable is empathy, which of course is not synonymous with sympathy. It's not the same word. It means trying to feel what someone else may be feeling.
Hmm.
And so I like to start there because with kids, a lot of times, I don't know why, but grown-ups forget what it's like to be a kid.
Hmm.
And very important for you to remember. If you have two kids and they have different personalities, of course, that's perfectly natural. That's the way that is. And the real thing is to try and understand from their point of view what they may be experiencing. My experience, I'll tell you this. 2 days ago, I was in the Minneapolis airport. Seem to be spending my whole life in airports these days. And I saw a girl, I don't know, maybe she's a teenager, 18, 19, and she had green hair and it was all cut really crazy. And she had a bunch of metal poked through her face and she had some words tattooed on her face and stuff. And of course, her clothing was very complimentary to her facial appearance. And it's very easy for us, you have a job, you go to work, you
Right.
have a responsible, you could see that girl and just think, uh, you know,
Right.
but
Doesn't fit into my life. Yeah.
if you just take a moment, you might think, gee, why would someone do that? What's that about, really? Well, it is my belief that the worst feeling in the world is to feel like you're invisible. And a lot of children, I think, a lot of their problems, especially as regards communication, stems from them feeling that they aren't seen
Mm.
or heard. And when I looked at this girl, uh, as she was going by, I just smiled at her and she looked so startled by it. But then she looked kind of pleased and was gone. I mean, didn't stop to say
Right.
anything.
Right. Right.
But I thought, so for that moment, she felt like, oh, I'm really seen. Now, it's unfortunate to feel like you have to go to all these extremes to be seen, but I think it's indicative of what her feeling. must be inside. Now, I don't know anything about her. I don't know where she comes from, but it's a very common feeling when you're young to feel like no one sees me or hears me. And it's a terrible experience. If you are able to connect with your kids in a way, and, saying to kids, oh, I know how you feel, not always the best possible method of
Right.
connecting with them.
Right.
Sometimes employing empathy, you may be able to say, wow, you must feel terrible for whatever the situation is. Maybe you were overlooked in a school pageant, or maybe you worked harder on your project in school than anyone else, and the teacher didn't single it out and gave it to some kid who didn't do any work. There are all kinds of injustices in this life. But sometimes a good opening is to refer to your own life and to be able to say, when I was in school, I remember blah, blah, blah. I felt horrible. I felt no one was listening at all to what I said. Now, you don't have to connect all the dots, but kids, for the most part, in my experience, are enormously perceptive and bright. They have to be dumbed down to be dumb.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there are great things to dumb them down, drugs and alcohol. And I think the worst is just disappointment with life
Mhm.
can also dumb you down and lower your expectations. But by the same token, any father listening has the power to reverse that process. But you have to really be listening. That's
So
also
what would you
foundational.
listen? What would you listen for? I mean, I think a lot of parents probably have kids who are okay at this, but they don't have the same internal motivation to pursue it, to do anything about it. They're fine to do perfunctory whatever needs to be done to get
Sure.
the grade, but they don't realize the value of what we're talking about, which is that ability to get up and talk whenever you need to in front of
Right.
small or large group, and how that can later on set you apart by just uh,
Well,
degrees of
well, of
success.
course, rather than foist your desire or opinion on them, I would ask them, and this is the first thing that starts, I would try to be constantly in communication by talking to your kids.
Mhm.
This does not mean lecturing. It does not mean promoting your agenda. It really means saying to them, hey, that friend of yours, Bob, is not around anymore. What's up with that? Or, um, did you study for this test? How did you do? What did you get on that? Now, it's very hard to control ourselves because we know more than kids. We have more life experience. And there's a tremendous desire on the part of any father, I think, to jump in and try to say, do this,
Mhm.
I can help you. But you can't help anybody who doesn't want to be helped.
Sure.
Doesn't happen. So the first thing is they have to feel like when they talk to you, you're listening to them. And active listening is easy to do, but it takes practice because um, Paul, you're old enough to know the film actor Carl Malden
Sure.
from
Streets of San
Streetcar
Francisco.
Named Streets of San Francisco. I was actually thinking of his Academy Award winning films, uh, uh, On the
On the
Waterfront,
waterfront.
Streetcar
Sure.
Named Desire. But I was good friends with him. And I remember asking him one time saying, uh, can you tell the difference between a good actor and a bad actor? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. He said, now you understand this guy had been on Broadway in Streetcar Named
Sure.
Desire.
Yeah.
Got, I don't know, maybe 1,200 performances. He said, when you're in a show that's 8 shows a week for years, you know everybody's lines in the show. You know every line by heart. He said, so a good actor is listening as if they have no idea what's coming next. And even though they've heard it a million times, you have to concentrate as if you have no, so that when you do hear it, takes you a moment to process what they're saying. He said, bad actors are just waiting for when it's their turn to speak. We don't want to fall into that category. We want to be listening. And if it's something that you may have heard before because you're older and have more life experience, you must control that impulse to jump in and interrupt or jump in and say, no, 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 here is what you need. Because the process of listening to someone makes an authentic connection with them. Now, if your kid expresses a disappointment or frustration with something, I can tell you right now, the solution is improved communication skills. And techniques to do that, very simple. We'll do some right here. Anybody can use right now. I mean, we've already jumped in with the idea of active listening. But it's so funny because so much of Wilson method is simple stuff. And sometimes people are looking for some Byzantine, arcane, complicated, nothing complicated. If it was, I wouldn't be able to do it. It's all simple stuff. And truthfully, Paul, I think maybe 50 years ago, it was probably common knowledge. It was probably just everybody knew this all the time. But technology has short-circuited a lot of those skills. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I was going to say the most obvious that I know everyone listening is familiar with is eye contact. But we'll get to that in a moment. But the prevalence of smartphones is contributing to everyone, not just kids, but it's particularly bad for kids because they don't have any other frame of reference. And they, as no doubt everyone's familiar now, they're very bad at reading other people's faces. Well, of course they are. They're not looking at other people's faces. They're looking down at their phone. Click, 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 click,
Right.
Most kids have a serious lack of facial affect. Well, why wouldn't they? They don't use their faces. They're texting, right? So with all this stuff, and I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'll give you a good example with my son. Now, I never foisted any of this stuff on my kid. It's not like I'm Dr. Frankenstein. I reacted to my son. The day before my son started preschool, he seemed a little nervous.
Yeah.
Right? Makes sense.
Yep.
And I sat down on his bed every night I would talk to him just about whatever's going on in the day. Nothing important. I said, are you looking forward to this? And he suddenly blurted out, he said, how do you make friends? And I said, it's easy. I said, you can do it. It's easy. I said, ask people about themselves. Ask them, what do they like? Ask them what foods they like. Ask them what TV shows they like. Ask them what sports they like. And I said, I guarantee you that they'll warm up to you because they see you're interested in them. Son came home from school the first day of preschool. So how old is he? Maybe he's 4 years old. He said, I made a friend. I said, of course you did. You're going to make millions of friends, of course. So this was very empowering. It doesn't matter if it's a friend for life. It doesn't matter if it's the friend you want them to have. What you want your children to see is that they are not powerless to affect the course of their lives. And that's what communication does for us. You know, when you were saying before, as we launched into this, you were saying what they can do to get things out of this life. Warren Buffett, the most successful investor in modern history, I saw an interview he did last year where a young person was interviewing him and said, what advice can you give to young people that could help us? And without a hesitation at all, Warren Buffett says, oh, I can tell you something you can do right now that will increase your value by at least 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And I leaned forward and the interviewer, yes. And Buffett says, improve your communication skills, both written and verbal.
Mm-hmm.
He said, doesn't matter how much brain power you have. If you cannot communicate that, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. I thought it was fantastic. He said, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is the truth. He said, that transmission of information is communication.
Yeah.
So if your kids want something out of life, a new bike, a better grade, to make friends, to see the world, I don't know, there's a gigantic list of things that kids are interested in. If you don't tamp down and repress their interests, they're almost unlimited. It is only children who have been told to be quiet, who've been told to go to their rooms, who've been stuck in front of the television because it's a convenient babysitter, you know? Well, whose fault is that? They're just kids. Turn off that damn television and encourage them to put their phones down, because there's exciting things to do in real life. And I'll give you this other example. Again, when my son was 4 or 5, I honestly don't know how this started, but he invented a game called Eggs Benedict. Now, to this day, I teach this in the live training I do. I absolutely teach this. Now, my son didn't know anything about facial affect or anything else. I don't know why. And I'm almost positive he didn't know what Eggs Benedict was. He must have heard it or something. But after he'd brushed his teeth before he's going to bed, standing in front of the mirror, he'd say, give me an emotion to feel. And so then I would just rattle off all these different feelings or emotions. And then he would embrace that emotion or feeling while saying Eggs Benedict. Now, he had no idea, but this is so brilliant because the words
Sure.
don't matter.
Right. The
The
facial
word,
affect, it's the
right.
expression, it's the
And
volume, it's
so
the
I'd say
acting.
suspicious, and he'd say, Eggs Benedict. Now, my kid had seen people on TV and movies in real life who looked suspicious. He knew what that was. I'd say, overjoyed, and he'd go, Eggs Benedict, you know. And of course, I keep falling down laughing every single one
Right,
he
yeah.
does. Hilarious to me. But it was an opportunity for him to practice facial affect. And it's like anything else, especially if you spend a lot of time, if you're a kid and spend a lot of time on the phone, you're not even aware that there's nothing going on here. So, and of course, one of the things that's surprising is when you start teaching people to play the Eggs Benedict game, they think their reactions are huge and over the top.
Right, right.
And they're frequently really tiny. But the more you do it, the better you get at it.
So
And
in this case, he taught you an example of how what you could later on use to get people to understand this thing. But what would have happened had he not had that experience, or had not, progressively? I mean, living in a household where that is a real value, I can see how that would be something that he
right, well,
would take
I
on. But
think
I'm curious, as the
think
kids who do, like the dads who really are interested in developing this from scratch. They have a kid who's neither extroverted nor introverted, really, and they just
right.
want to impress upon them this incredible how important
No,
this skill is.
well, I can tell you this. Uh, no one takes medicine because it's good for them. I mean, adults do,
Well,
but
unless you have a
kids don't.
cough and you want to get rid of the cough, I mean,
Right, but that's a grown-up.
right.
Kids will just cough themselves silly. Kids don't do stuff because it's good for them. They do stuff that's fun. And so I would focus on doing things that are fun. That's one of the reasons that was the example why I thought of Eggs Benedict, because it's a game that you can play. And you could play it with the whole family, where you could write different emotions on a card and then turn them face down and shuffle them up. And people draw a card and have to say it. Now, you don't have to say Eggs Benedict. You can pick any phrase you want. But the point of saying a phrase where the words don't matter allows you to focus on letting your feelings come out through, I'll tell you another funny, weird story. Um, I was performing at a club in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and one of the hosts came backstage between shows and said, "Oh, there's a guest who'd like to come back and say hello to you." And I said, "Okay, send them back." So the door opens and there's Cary Grant. And I'm telling you, Paul, he looked just like himself. He was tall and impossibly handsome and beautifully groomed and dressed. I mean, and now I can't do impressions, so I'm gonna do a very bad impression of his voice. But he was like, "Oh, Larry Wilson, you are fabulous," and he was very complimentary. And I was like, kind of paralyzed because it was Cary Grant,
Right,
and
right.
and he must have talked to me for like 20 minutes, and I couldn't tell you what was going on. I was just like, this is the craziest
Starstruck.
thing. And at the end, he just said, "Oh, I know you have another show. I should let you get back to this. I just wanted to say hello and tell you I loved what you did. I thought it was great." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you. And as he leaned out the door, he turned back and looked at me and said, "Remember, Larry Wilson, think good thoughts." And I went, "Okay." And then I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it shows on your face."
Hmm.
And then he was gone. Now, I've never forgotten this.
Sure.
Of course he's right. Of course it shows on your face. What you're thinking, what you're feeling, it comes through in our facial affect. And of course, that leads directly into the preeminent problem nowadays, especially for kids, of eye contact. Eye contact is like anything else. You have to practice.
Otherwise,
Maybe
it
in,
seems awkward. Yeah.
yeah, maybe in a bygone era it wasn't, but Shakespeare says the eyes are the window to the soul. And of course he's right. When we look at someone, we're really looking into them. And especially for kids sometimes, and especially if they aren't extroverts, they may feel I'm being judged. If I look directly at someone, they're judging me. And it may be because unconsciously they're thinking they can see into me. Well, we want to practice making eye contact with people. And a great way to do that, of course, is when we first meet them, is when you're introduced to someone. you don't want to be looking down the way you look at your phone. We want you to look up into their face, into their eyes, and say, "Hi, I'm so and so, whoever you are." And it doesn't mean you have to stare at them, but you have to make eye contact. Now, one of the students in my current, I did a 5-day, for the first time ever, I did a 5-day challenge online
Right.
for
Yeah, I
people.
saw that. Yeah.
And one of the people who trained with me on there uh, was very candid and said, she's very bright, obviously bright woman, and she was a film director. And she said,
Mm.
"I have to tell you, I'm a little bit on the spectrum, and it's really hard for me to maintain eye contact." And I said, "I completely understand. I have a simple technique for you." And I had a photograph that someone had uh, that had like superimposed on a man's face, had a triangle that was sort of like this, sort of cut across the bridge of his nose and went up to the middle of his forehead. I said, next time you're in a situation where you feel like you should be making eye contact with someone, imagine this triangle there. And you're going to look at one of the points of the triangle for just a couple seconds.
Mhm.
And then you're going to move to the next point of the triangle for just a couple seconds. Then you're going to move. You don't have to turn your head. I'm exaggerating like this. You just move your eyes. Then you're going to move your eyes to the next point. And if you want, you can reverse the direction or you can do the same direction, whatever you want to do. And I said, this way, someone you're talking to doesn't feel like you're staring at them like a crazy person, but they feel like you're really looking at them.
But
You're
is that
looking.
the same? Is that the same as eye contact? If I look at your forehead and the ends of your the side of your two eyes, and I don't really look into your eyes, I mean, I can see how you would perceive that I am looking at your eyes, but I'm
Right.
missing out on the value of looking at your eyes
Well,
potentially.
it's much more powerful if I'm able to look directly into your eyes. But again,
But if you
for
need to
people
get used to it.
who this is a new skill to master, this is a way to ease into this. And particularly because this particular woman said she was on the spectrum. And I thought, well, that's a very challenging kind of situation. So I want you to be able to develop some confidence that you can do this easily and there's no downside. Nobody's life hangs in the balance. No one bursts out in an angry, uh, somehow yelling match about, it's like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So much, I think kids need to be told that everyone feels self-conscious.
Mhm.
We're all concerned about what other people think about us because we're afraid that they may be thinking negative things about us. But if that's really true, then you may realize that everyone else you meet is so busy worrying about what you think about them, they don't really have time to think about you.
Certainly, right.
They're worried that you're going to think, "Ooh, where'd you get that haircut? In a pet shop? And what kind of clothes are those? And why didn't you get that teeth fixed?" And, but no one ever really does, you know? If they do, I would think it's only on the internet where they're so anonymous
Yeah, they can
and
actually say all those
disembodied.
things. Yeah. Yeah.
But in real life, that doesn't happen. Because what we're looking to do, sometimes in Wilson Method, I talk about 3 C's. That is, I want you to be able to connect with people before you've spoken a word
Hmm.
so that you can convey your message and create authentic bonds. That connecting with people, again, comes back to semiotic information, non-spoken information. It's in our eye contact, it's in our facial affect, it's in our smile. When I was on the road a lot in casinos, I was only working like an hour a night. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I would spend a lot of time at the poker table in casinos. And of course, the joke of this is that I was playing with players who were light years beyond my capability. But they took a shine to me. I don't know why. I guess because I was friendly.
And you were giving them your money.
Well, I was giving them my money, but one of them, more than one time or another, would pull me aside and say, "You don't really understand this game." And I'd say, "Yes, I do." And they go, "No, no, you really don't." And so they would sort of give me pointers and tips, and they helped improve my game. But one night, I was at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, and I was in a game, a no limit hold'em game, and there were some crazy people who were really going well. And there was a guy who I had been told, I don't know if this is true, but I've been told he was an FBI interrogator. And he got into a pot with another guy, and they started getting into a raising war, and everyone else dropped out. And finally, all the cards had been dealt. Finally, the guy who was his opponent pushed all the rest of his chips and I'm all in. And this guy who's supposedly an interrogator looked at him and said, "Wow, wow." And he thought about it a long time. I mean, for a poker game, maybe 3 minutes.
Wow.
It seemed a long time. And he kept talking to the guy, saying, "So you're saying that there's like one card left in the deck and you caught that case card?" And he kept talking to the guy. And then at a certain point he goes, "So like you really sucked out? You got that last card to beat me?" And the guy looked at him and kind of smiled. And the FBI guy said, "I call," and pushed all his money in. And the other guy threw his hand away. Obviously, he'd been bluffing.
Right.
And when the FBI guy got up from the table, I ran after him. I said, and I followed him into the men's room and said, "You've got to tell me what just happened." The guy said, "You know what? Wait for me outside and I'll come out and talk." So he comes in and he goes, "What is it?" I go, I couldn't, how did you know that guy was bluffing?" And he said, "Oh, you didn't see what happened?" I said, "No, I didn't see anything. I just saw you talking to the guy. And then after a while you said, 'I call.'" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I was trying to get him to smile." I said, "Oh?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "An authentic smile is symmetrical." He said, "When you try to force a smile,
You end up with a
it's lopsided and asymmetrical." And he said, "I just kept talking until the guy smiled at me, and his smile was sort of like this. It was completely asymmetrical." So he said, "So I knew he was bluffing." Now, of course, this added to my game immeasurably. But it's, of course, a very valuable lesson for all of us in terms of connecting with people before we've said a word. If you try to force that smile, even if they don't understand it consciously, there's something off-putting about it, whatever it may be. But we come back to Cary Grant again. I'm not asking any of you to be fake or phony. I'm not asking you to try and be actors. If you think of something that's pleasing, it shows on your face. It's as simple as this. It doesn't mean it has to be in accordance with whatever's being discussed. No one ever has to know what it is you're thinking. I can tell you right now, Paul, and of course it's apropos because it has to do with my son. If I ever need to smile. If I ever need to have to, you can see it happening on my face right now. I can't control myself. When my son was 4 or 5, we were walking through a parking lot in the summer and it was really hot. And I was like, whoo, you know, and we got to the car and I was fumbling for my keys and I was holding my son's hand and he looked up at me with a gleam in his eye. He said, "It's damned hot out here," as you would say. And I fell down
Oh, yeah.
laughing.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All I have to do is think about that.
Yeah.
That's all I have to do. I know that everyone listening to this, it doesn't have to be a story like that. It could be, but maybe it's just, maybe you think of a pet. Maybe you think of a loved one. Maybe you think of someone famous, or maybe you think of an experience you had when you triumphed, or something happened that totally surprised you and made you laugh out loud. You know, none of this stuff happens automatically. You've got to practice it.
Yeah.
But if you practice it, you will find extraordinary results.
Yeah.
And with kids too. Uh, Kids are able to read semiotic, nonverbal information very clearly.
Yeah. They're very observant. Yeah. They're
So
always
you
looking
may
for
you may
cracks in the
think that,
armor.
right, of course, you may think, oh no, they have no idea. Let me tell you something. They know. Okay? So the way that you can overcome this is by clearing your mind and thinking of something. It may not be the thing you're going to talk with them about. It may just be something else that pleases you, that's pleasing. Maybe it's chocolate cake, you know? As I'm thinking about it right now, it sounds really
As if,
good, you
yeah.
know? It could be anything,
Yeah.
but that shines through your face and has an impact on the person you're speaking to.
Yeah.
So if it's a stranger, they're much more inclined. It doesn't mean they're going to open their wallet and give you their credit cards, but it means they're going to be much more receptive to what
Right.
you may have to speak about.
And so these are all the techniques that you teach both in your live two-day. I assume these are like weekend sessions that I know you're holding
Sure,
one in LA,
sure.
and then the one online is a 5-day, just an hour a day. Is that what the one online is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I'm experimenting between half an hour and an hour, but right
Uh-huh.
now it's an hour a day.
Hmm.
And uh, you know what? I'll tell you what, because you've been so gracious here. If you have people who are interested in looking at this, I think it's a very reasonably priced, but forget all that. If your people go to thewilsonmethod.com, and somewhere on that page, there'll be information about a 5-day challenge online. If they go on there and use this code I'm going to give you, then it'll knock, I can't do the math in my head, like 93% off. It'll make it less than you're spending on Starbucks. That's what it'll make it. And the code, because of this show, is DAD.
Oh, that sounds good. That's easy to
As
remember.
simple as
Dad.
that. All you have to do is enter that. There'll be some place where it says, "Oh, do you have a code?" Yes, I do. DAD, dad.
All right.
And it's like I say, and I try to always emphasize this. I'm always suspicious when people want to present systems or plans or processes that are very complex. Because I've met some incredibly smart people in my life, and they were able to convey any kind of message about sometimes very complicated matters. They're able to make it so anyone can understand
Yeah.
that. I mean, we're sort of jumping around here, but sometimes people think, oh, I have to use big words or I have to talk really fast. No, when you talk fast, you sound like a used car salesman. Now, maybe there's some people who are intimidated by that, but that's not what I'm looking to inculcate in you.
Right.
I want you to learn simple techniques you can use every single day. And the more you use them, the more I'll tell you this. One of my students, a guy who came in from Germany to train with me in a 2-day boot camp, and it was a lovely guy, and he really was coming about business because he had to cold call people and he had to sometimes do something like that. And he had a fantastic experience and did very, very well in the 2-day boot camp. But about a month after he was home, he sent me a video. He said, I want to thank you. I wasn't sure at first if this is worth the time and expense to come, but it was really great. And I learned so much and I'm using all stuff. He said, but something unexpected happened. He said, I realized I was talking with my wife about things we had never talked about in 10 years of marriage. And he said, I didn't realize I was using all this Wilson method technique. He said, it's so normal, it's so natural that it starts to become just a part of your everyday life. Well, that's a huge win
Sure.
as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think any couples who have not ever heard about active listening and then suddenly do active listening, it's like, wow, why we missed out on all those years of actually talking with each other rather than to each other.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a tendency to sometimes think it's like I don't know, it's like new agey kind of mumbo jumbo stuff,
Right, right.
but it isn't. It has to do with how we're wired in our DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that in the modern world that there is, as we start out the discussion about how the modern world is stealing away, we have to remember that ancient man used to be gathered around the campfire and telling stories and communicating in this just more organic way. And somewhere in our DNA that must be in there somewhere because it was a survival mechanism. So regaining that through programs like yours, I think is really, really important. I think you and I both share this real belief in how important this is, both for interpersonal communication and how it can really change your career if you're able to do it in front of groups. So I appreciate you taking the time to go over a lot of these things. I feel like we just got a little teaser about a whole bunch of techniques that you probably have
We
in
scratched the surface,
the
Paul. We
2-day
scratched the
class or the
surface.
5-day boot camp. You probably go deeper into these and really help people practice them and learn how to effectively use them because they're all,
Sure.
they're the like you say, they're not complicated, but they're the building blocks. And there is one part that is charisma. I mean, not everybody's Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or Obama or whatever, but a lot of it is technique. You disagree? You think anybody could
I
be that
God,
level
I'm
of?
sorry. It's bad manners for me to contradict the host, but I
No, I think
don't
everybody'd like to believe that it could happen to them.
I don't believe in that charisma stuff.
Hmm.
I think I think those are people who are highly skilled at using these techniques.
Yeah.
That they pay attention to people. I'll tell you this. When I had just graduated from college, a girl I knew invited me to a party at the Playboy Mansion. And when we were there, and there's hundreds of people there, and it was a big thing. And she said, "Oh, I really want you to meet Hef." And I thought, I don't think Hef wants to meet me. She said, "Oh, no, no, he's great." So she drags me over and says, "Oh, Hef, this is my friend Larry I was telling you about." And he says, "Oh, hi." He says, "Debbie tells me you just graduated from University of California." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "And what was your major?" I said, "Filmmaking." And he said, "Oh," he said, "Do you like film noir?" Now, I don't know, Paul, if you know film, it's a genre of
Yeah,
film.
sure.
And I said, "I love it." And he said, "Do you like the bad and the beautiful?" I said, "The greatest film noir ever made, of course. Are you kidding?" I said, "Let me ask you something. Why do you think Gloria Graham didn't become a bigger star. He said, wasn't she the most luminous creature you've ever seen? I said, yes, yes, but she wasn't as big a star. And next thing I know, he and I have been talking for 40 minutes in the middle. And I look around, there's a crowd of people who look like they want to strangle me.
Right,
And
right.
so I just said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize your time. It's been so nice. It's really great talking. He said, oh, thank you. It's great to meet you. I'm glad you came. I said, thanks. I went away. I thought, oh my God, I can see why this guy is so successful with women, because he's listening to me and responding in a way that shows he really heard what I said. And when I told someone this story in one of my boot camps, they said, well, that was just because he knew film and you knew film. And if what if he didn't? I said, you're missing the point. I guarantee you, if he didn't know what I was talking about, he would have said, oh, that's so interesting. I don't know anything about that.
Tell me more. Yeah.
What do you find
Right.
is the most interesting part of that's active listening. That made such an impact on me. I thought, oh my God, I felt like
Seen.
a young girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're lucky you
it's
didn't
sort
get
of,
pulled into that that
well,
web of intrigue.
it sort of made my head spin. I thought, this is intoxicating
Yeah, yeah,
to have somebody look at you and listen to you in a way that makes you feel seen
yeah,
and heard.
yeah.
And that's all kids want.
Right, right.
That's all they
That's
want.
good. That's good. Good thing for dads to keep in mind. Well, so everybody can find you and more of the programs that we talked about at the wilsonmethod.com, right? Yep.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you again, Larry Wilson, for joining me to talk about the communication. I think, as we said, we both share this the realization or the value of how important this is. So, thank you again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
My pleasure. It's been my pleasure.
All
I
right.
loved it.
Paul Banis of GreatDad.com. You can check out my coaching and other special offers at GreatDad.com/go. Until next time, stay strong.